So today we're talking about uncertainty, right? So let's look at uncertainty and let's kind of break that down into little, so we can get a good understanding. So let's just start in one dimension. So when we think of certainty or uncertainty, it's not sort of like we have complete certainty and then complete uncertainty, right? It's like it's a spectrum, right? It's a sliding scale. So it's almost like we talk about it like the fog, right? So you have some clarity, and then that clarity sort of disappears, and then you get kind of further and further into uncertainty. So that's how I would kind of think about uncertainty, right? I think a lot of people tend to sort of think of it as kind of either there is certainty, there isn't, and I think it's really better if we think about it more on a sliding scale. So with that in mind, and we're thinking about uncertainty kind of in a single dimension here, what are the best approaches to handle uncertainty? Well, we've kind of heard of a lot of these before, but deterministic is kind of the first approach that most people use. And obviously what we're talking about there in deterministic is a couple of different methods. So driver-based planning is a good approach in that environment, as well as sort of rolling forecasts. So rolling forecasts is what people tend to shift towards when they want a little bit more agility in addition to that sort of driver-based planning. Really what we're talking about in deterministic though is really, when we talk about sort of the scenario logic and the capabilities, it's really about optimization of the drivers that we're dealing with. So if those are price times volume or, percentage of other accounts, whatever those drivers may be, it's about optimizing the drivers in that world. But as we get kind of further and further out into uncertainty, really the techniques tend to change a bit, and people start to gravitate towards kind of probabilistic or stochastic type modeling. So common terms there are Monte Carlo analysis, and now obviously with newer technologies, AI, ML tend to be the big winner there. But really what's interesting there is you're not really focused so much on optimizing the drivers. You're actually now shifting to optimizing the algorithms. So you know where you want to go, and you're just trying to apply the right algorithm to kind of get you there. So it's almost like, I'm walking down, I know where I want to go in a city. What streets should I take? Well, that algorithm can shift and change to kind of help me get there in the end of the day. But as we move all the way, we're really far into kind of uncertainty. Even stochastic or probability sort of breaks down a little bit. And really the best approach at that phase is sort of an influencing approach. So at that point, you're trying to influence the outcomes. So you look for those black swans. You look for those things that are game changers. You look to break down barriers. And really sort of that approach or that scenario logic, as we wrote it here, is to sort of rewrite the rules, right? If you have very little certainty, best thing to do is to influence and write your own rules. So that's how I look at uncertainty sort of on a single dimension. If we can jump to the next slide, what we're going to do is take that single dimensional approach, and we're going to actually switch it into two dimensions. So rather than just looking at it as uncertainty, we're going to break that up into sort of two things. And this is the BCG matrix that I know everyone has seen. So rather than uncertainty, we have unpredictability and malleability. So lack of being able to forecast and the ability to be able to shape that. And if you do it on the two dimensions, what you notice is we actually have 4 zones. So the classic, adaptive, shaping, and visionary. But what's interesting, I think, is that the BCG matrix kind of plotted industries on this graph. And I think what we can really do as an organization is plot our strategic business units on that graph to really optimize that. So a classical, again, you're sort of in that steady state world. You're kind of using kind of GDP or other market indicators to kind of stay intact. A lot of people will start talking about agile planning strategies. That really relates more to the adaptive quadrant. It's great in unpredictable times to be a little bit more kind of agile. Shaping is where you actually have a lot of unpredictability and a lot of shaping capabilities or malleability. In that case, that's a great zone to be in, but it's also a bit risky of a zone to be in. So you tend to partner with other people when you go into that zone. So you're looking at kind of partnerships, kind of joining platforms, and so forth. And really the last zone here then is the kind of the game changer zone, right? That's where you're trying to disrupt. You have a lot of malleability in the market, so you have a lot to shape. but it's actually not that unpredictable. If you just carry it out, you can really be a visionary in that quadrant. So that's kind of how we look at uncertainty when we look at it and break it down into 2 dimensions. Let's just jump to the last slide here, and we're going to look at uncertainty now in 3 dimensions. So when we look at it in 3 dimensions, what's important to realize is that not all zones share the same potential, right? And so you need to maintain a healthy portfolio. When I say the same potential, I mean the same value creation opportunity. So we think about classical, right? Everyone tends to want to stick in classical, but the reality is the classical zone is really about value preservation, right? All the value is already baked into the ideas that you have in the classical world. And so there's very little value creation opportunity. Again, we talk a lot about adaptive. We think there's a lot of value there, but in reality, you're sort of filling voids and in short-term earnings and things like that. So it's not as much of a value creator as it could be. As you move into sort of the shaping zone, here's where there actually is a lot of opportunity to create value for your company. But you have to realize that in that world, you're sharing the outcomes with other participants, right? Other companies. You're not going it alone, and therefore you have to sort of share that value in there. But the last one is really that visionary quadrant, and that's where really the most amount of value creation lies. Again, that's where the shaping is great, malleability, but the unpredictability is not that high relative to other zones. So that's really where the biggest opportunity is. So when you sit back, I suggest to you that you take a look at what zones your business operates in, and then try to think of that again as a portfolio. So make sure that you've got sort of strategic business units in all areas of the zones, realizing that the real big opportunities are obviously kind of more in the visionary and shaping space. So I just wanted to give you kind of a teaser into sort of how I think about uncertainty, both on a single dimension and a multidimensional approach.